This is what I'm going to call a mildly moderated panel here. We have with us Colleen O'Lear, who's head of mobile strategy for the Washington Post, and this is about evolving products at news organizations. Colleen is the head of mobile strategy, where she focuses on news product development aimed at growing the Post's digital audience and cultivating strong reader habits. In 10 years at the Post, Colleen has shepherded complex projects and initiatives, including the Select app, By the Way, the Lily, and the Post Snapchat, Apple News, and Facebook news channels. Joining her, also from the Washington Post, is Bailey Kattleman, lead product manager of native apps for the Washington Post. Bailey is lead product manager there, and she joined the Post in 2020 to lead a cross-functional team in developing and implementing product strategies in the app space. Before that, she served in a similar capacity at NPR for 3 years, where she piloted a major overhaul of their mobile strategy, guided by quantitative and qualitative feedback from the audience. And the other person on the panel is Ryan Restivo from Newsday, and he is a project manager for mobile apps at the Newsday Media Group. He led a project to redesign Newsday, which launched in October 2019. He also helped redesign store presence with new images and video on Apple and Google Play stores. Before that, he was editorial development coordinator at Newsday, leading projects such as the launch of free metered tiers of users into the Newsday iOS and Android app. And they are here to talk about creating, evolving products at their large news organizations, which is another aspect of how you have to work within your organization. So I'm going to start by asking each of them to give us a brief, what was your most successful creation launch product, and how did that come about?
Who wants to start?
You're there now, so go for it.
Okay, so rather than pick a specific product, I think I'd rather focus on like the why part of your question.
Fantastic.
So I think that with every product, you learn something, right? So there are a lot of things that we have done, sometimes on our owned and operated platforms and sometimes off platform, that have worked out, and some of them haven't. Some of them have been greatly successful, and some of them were experiments that just taught us something and were meant to sort of have a short shelf life. But I think that what generally makes the things that actually are successful is really tight understanding of why you're doing it. So really understanding why you're creating the product or why you're doing the thing that you're doing and what you're hoping to achieve out of it and who you're making it for. And I think that the only way that we achieve that really is through like clear expectations and clear goals. And particularly, we've seen success at the Post by doing this through really tight relationships between news and product. So that's why I work very closely with Bailey Kattleman to have success in all of our mobile products. If Bailey and I are in lockstep, I think that we're always making progress, even if we sort of have to change things up. So,
well, Bailey, that sounds like a perfect intro.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say a similar thing, that it's a hard question to answer, right? Because I've had features and products that are really successful by metrics, meaning a lot of people use them, but it didn't feel necessarily like we were advancing our larger audience goals, maybe not. And the other way too, sometimes people love a feature qualitatively, but the metrics don't really support that. So going back to what Colleen said about goals being really clear and really specific about what your goals are. One of the first features that I launched when I got to the Post last year was a widget for the iOS 14 home screen. So this is the ability to kind of have a widget on your home screen that would give you the headlines. And the reason that this was really successful for us is that it got to our audience goal of bringing people back to our app and helping people to develop a habit with the apps, right? So it's an easy thing to check first thing in the morning or whenever you pick up your phone. You can check those headlines. And so in that way, it advanced an audience goal. But it's something that is successful in that way, but we're still trying to build awareness of that feature, and get more people to use it. So it's a perfect example of how sometimes things can be successful in one way, and you still have to continue to work at full success, depending on your definition.
All right, and Ryan, is it different for you? The same?
Yeah, it's no pressure, right? Yeah, I mean, like in terms of thinking, like I was thinking about the features like that we kind of done over the last years, right? After redesigning our app, we thought about like kind of what are the next kind of steps? Like how do we, right? We're local, New York, Long Island based. Our job is to build the relationship with our users, right? We have a finite number of users in this area, and we need to make sure that we're showing that Newsday is a strong presence in their lives. So one of the things that we thought through was this idea that I came with, we had like as an idea 2 years ago, in terms of like building like local notifications for our users, like having users opt into specific towns. We have 256 different towns across Long Island. So you could think about how hard that could be to scale to start, right? But I think that, we could get into this more later, right? But I think to Coleen and Bailey's points, I think it's about having the right questions to start, and kind of pursuing what those questions mean for your users, then asking, I know a lot of people talked yesterday about doing user interviews and making sure that it aligns with what you want to accomplish as well. Because I think as they both kind of just said, you can have your metrics, right? People vote with their clicks in terms of what metrics you get and the results out of everything, but you want to make sure everything kind of goes along to where it needs to go. We've done a lot of things at Newsday over the last few years, but I think in terms of building how we've been able to accomplish and how we've been able to do that, we had users opt in to specific towns. We were able to route based on your user profile. We figured out a way to route like how you would opt in, but add that town to the alert screen that we had, to make it a lot easier for users to opt in. And we've had some good success with it, but we're still building, and it's still something we still have to work on.
You all have talked about goals, and it talked about the importance of setting them before you start developing and before you really get into it. And I think I also heard a little bit about if you have a good click through on something, that may not be the most important goal, depending on the bigger, broader strategy. So how do you set those goals in a large organization? How do you get agreement on, of all the measures we can use, and the fact that we sometimes change measures every other day, how do you decide what is your important, the big goal you're shooting for?
I can start with that one. I think like this gets to what Coleen was talking about, how important it is for news and product and engineering to work closely together as you're developing new features. That, as you said, it first starts with goals, and that's really about your leadership also having the same goals. It's a lot easier when everybody's pulling in the same direction from the beginning of the year, and that's something we've been able to develop at the Post that we're really proud of. So I think it gets down to for each feature, what problem are you solving, and how does it ladder up to your overall goals for your product for the year, and your larger plan? So I think that's the first place, and then agreeing about not only what is the objective, but how are you going to measure it, right? So those are kind of two different things. So if it's that we want to build a habit with people, then maybe your objective, that's your objective, and then maybe how you're going to measure it, your key result is the amount of times that people come back in a day or a week. So I think getting on the same page about what success looks like, and then you can use that decision as you're trying to develop scope for the project, right? So you're gonna have to make some tough decisions as you develop any feature or product, about what's in or out of scope for that particular first launch. And that should always be your barometer. So you can go back to say, how much does this gonna advance that key result? And that's how you decide what's essential for sort of a first release.
I was gonna kind of tag on that, because I think to what Bailey's saying, especially in mobile apps, right? Our user has found us, right? They sought us out in the store. There's an amount of, especially since we're local, subscriber driven business, and like we all are. but our users entrusting us with that kind of that to put us on their phone to be in that space. Like we have to, our job is to kind of make sure that we're making it worth it. Like we want to make sure, like Bailey's saying, build habits, right? We want to do that, but we also want to make sure that, we know that people leave. I think it's right. Within like a month, people will leave you if they aren't getting what they want. So like we need to make sure we're continuing to build that trust and build that relationship with the user, because there are expectations that are set when somebody says, I am gonna go actually out to seek out to download your app. Like they want to make sure that they're getting everything that they can and that we're providing that value.
All right. And Colleen, is there anything that you?
I mean, I think that they kind of covered our bases well.
Okay.
With that, yeah.
Well, then another thing I'm wondering is a lot of people here, they're either students or they work for small or independent news organizations. So their problems with developing mobile apps are time and personnel. And they might look at you guys and go, man, you have this richness of time and money and personnel. What are your problems? What is a difficult part of being on a mobile team at a large organization?
I'm thinking, and you on it? Okay,
no, go ahead, Ryan.
No, I know it seems like and it might sound like everybody's got finite or infinite resources, but really everything's finite. You got to make sure every priority is in order. They see the nodding already. So like, you got to make sure every priority is in order, right? Like there are certain things like, especially, I don't like to say, like, sometimes I feel like local news, right? Like I've lived on Long Island for most of my life. This was the paper that my parents, put on our kitchen table. I started in the sports. I started reading in the sports section when I looked at the paper. I know a lot of people do that too still. But like, there's a certain, I don't want to say target, but like, I know that there are a lot of users who will tell me things, or if I say I work at Newsday, they'll say, oh, well, I don't like X or Y. Like, and then I have to contextualize that and know like that's a valid issue, but also we're tackling 5 other big priorities for us, and I got to make sure these other things are in order. And yeah, so like it feels like we have infinite resources, but we have to be really focused and understand what are the most important things to tackle right now, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, perception isn't reality. That people always perceive, like the bigger the org, the more the time, the more the resources, the more buy-in. I mean, that's not necessarily true. You have to use every person, as Ryan said, in a maximum way to get what you need, right? As a company, or what your goal is, or how you can achieve that. I can't keep adding editors to the app just because Bailey and I want to introduce new features. We have to think about how we really streamline that. Are there things that we're doing today that we shouldn't do tomorrow? Are there things that we just shouldn't upkeep and aren't really like worth the investment in, or can maintain themselves in a different way, right? Like, are there different ways to run features? Should you maintain multiple apps? These are like a lot of the questions that we ask ourselves. And I think that, one of the biggest challenges in a large organization to just sort of getting something done, period, not just in a mobile front, is it's like steering a ship, right? Like it takes time and it takes buy-in, but that goes back to the point that we made earlier about really being simpatico with your partners around the company, really understanding the company goals at a high level so that you can make sure, as you set your granular goals and your OKRs and KPIs and those types of things, that they're always checking up to something. Because if everybody is on the same page about the high level goals, about what you're there to do, it's easier to get buy-in for things. It just may take some time, right? Like the news moves really fast. Journalists in particular are creatures of habit. So it's tough to change processes and workflows, but I've found that when you explain to people the why, just like when we explain to users the why they need to know the news, or why they should use this product, or why it's going to benefit them, people get on board. The Post is a place that really prides is innovation and creative thinking and trying to move forward and innovate in a way. And I think that people really own that regardless of if they touch an innovation space. Like they want to advance the cause. So they want to think about mobile and how they tell their stories, even when they aren't people who touch products, right? People come and say, I'm working on this really great story. How can I really make it work for mobile? What can we do? And I think that that's really, really important.
Bailey, anything to add or?
Well, I was just going to say that, as you're asking that question, my brain kind of took it in a slightly different direction. So if you'll allow me, as you asked, like, what's the most difficult part of being on a mobile product team at a newspaper? I was thinking about it compared to like mobile products team at maybe in a different industry. And, to me, that is like the challenges that, we all want to be metrics driven, right? And all of our decisions. But when your product is in some sense the news, you're going to have natural ebbs and flows in your data that ends up being shaped much more by the news cycle than by your individual product decisions itself. So that can oftentimes make it really challenging. Colleen was talking about kind of mapping everything back to the numbers to be strictly metrics driven, because you kind of have to like be able to look at the larger picture and look at things in a larger time frame to normalize for the news cycle a bit. So that's one of the challenges that I found about having a news-based mobile product.
So you all you're at the top of your game at a large organization. You're heading mobile product development. How do people become you? What should they be doing now in school? What should they be studying, thinking about, learning, doing on the side? And how do they think about their first job if they want to point themselves to becoming, where you are? How do they do that?
I'll try to take this one. First of all, don't be me. There you go. That's an easy one, right? Like, yeah. Don't be me, right? Like, I think I was trying to think about how to answer this question that you're asking. I think it's like everyone has their own unique point of view, and I think that leaning into your point of, and I know like, oh wow, I lost my train of thought there. No, but I think leaning into kind of what your point of view is kind of the most important thing. I graduated in 2008. I looked this up before we had this conversation. The first iPhone was the thing that came out then. So it wasn't like, it was a large learning curve to where we are now. So like, all the skills that I picked up on along the way have kind of led to, like, it's just the ability to learn new things, right? Because I, again, graduated 2008. It wasn't like we were primed to learn about all these different kinds of things at this point. I don't have a formal journalism degree, but that also means that talking with editors or talking with, developers or anything else, right? I bring a different perspective than everybody else because of everything I've had in past experiences that has kind of built up to this, right? So like my first role was to like you mentioned at Newsday in the intro, right? Like my first role was like a QA product hybrid role, or product roles before we had product roles, basically. But it was to work out problems between our newsroom and, digital development. So, it was about solving problems for the users, not just our users, but, our internal newsroom users. And, finding a way to figure out how to solve those problems led me to learn a lot of different new things. So I think it comes down to like everyone has their own toolkit, but also like the ability to learn is probably going to be the most important thing because as always people have been talking about, right? In here and on the other sessions, right? That this is going to continue to evolve, and we're all going to need to continue to pick up all different types of new skills to make sure we're meeting and exceeding where we need to be or where our companies need to be in the future. So it's on us to kind of make sure that we are still able to pick up those things and learn and solve all the different problems that we have and move forward.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I would say you just always have to kind of be open to new opportunities and new experiences. I started in a really different capacity. I thought I was going to be a journalist in school, a sports writer, and then sort of just kept saying yes to different opportunities that I got along the way and kind of found my way into technology. And I ended up finding that many people who are product managers actually have English degrees because, a core kind of facet of that is being able to read and write, coherently and communicate well with other people. So, those English degrees are really valuable. Don't anyone tell you differently. But yeah, I think that, just continuing to sort of follow your passion, and you don't have to have a computer science degree to get into technology. You can learn. And as Ryan said, like, you often have a different perspective on things than those other people in the room. And so, especially in the product world, a lot of product is being able to sort of translate between two people who speak kind of different languages in a way, right? Like the business and engineering. And journalists as well. So, having somebody who can kind of live in both of those worlds is actually really valuable. So you might have a special skill because of your background that could be, line you up for a job that you don't know about today or that doesn't exist today. So I would say just keep being open to new opportunities, keep saying yes. And that's the best advice I can give.
Bailey and Ryan are so right. I think that you just always have to be a student. It doesn't mean that you always have to be having a formal education, but you should always be asking questions. Anytime you get the opportunity to ask anyone a question, to understand their job, to understand their role, to understand their perspective, to understand the things that keep them up at night, it will make you a better journalist. It will make you a better colleague. It will make you a more empathetic leader. When I was in college, I went to college in New Orleans at a smaller school. When I was in school, I had a full-time internship at NOLA.com. At that time, NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, which RIP, was 7 days a week, and a paper that was very prominent and really well read as a print product in New Orleans. And I had this, and they were completely different entities, right? Like NOLA.com was the Times-Picayune's website, but they treated themselves like they were completely different companies. Totally bizarre in today's world, right? Where we're like, that's a cohesive product. Like, why would you treat that separately? So I got to understand digital from a different perspective as it was sort of coming about in a new way. And before we had apps, to Ryan's point about our ages. But when I graduated, I wanted to be a copy editor. And actually, they offered me a job at NOLA.com, and I turned that down for another internship at the Times-Picayune to be a copy editor, to work on the print product, like to work in news and sports on like the tree, right? Like turn down this digital path to do that. But I learned so much from having these cross-functional skills, and the things I had learned at NOLA.com taught me a lot in my copy editing capacity and allowed me, to Bailey's point, to be able to speak to different kinds of people in a different kind of way and understand how we all were a piece to getting like the fuller picture done, right? So I think it's really important that you don't see your path as like very linear, that you see it as this thing where you're a constant sponge and you're learning from people around you and you are open to opportunities, because it will just make you essentially more agile in the future.
So for all of you then, can you tell us about, at your organization, when you're developing products, clearly not all of them is going to be successful. So are you allowed to try and fail? And a sort of a spin-off of that, how long does a new product get before you or somebody decide, this isn't working?
Well, it's kind of tough to put a name on it, but it certainly happens, right? And I think we do have a culture at the Post of sort of like try new things and fail fast and learn and iterate, and that's really great. But I will say that, to truly, I don't know that fail is necessarily the way that I would put it, but like, as Colleen said earlier, you learn something, right, from every thing that doesn't have the same results that you thought it would, right? So any number of things can happen. And sometimes you have to convince people in the org that it's time to pull the plug on it. And sunsetting a product or a feature is really hard. Sometimes it's really tough to be able to move on and kind of to call the losses sunk losses and, get out of it at the end of the day. But I do think it's about, what did you learn? I can tell you about like I was actually at a previous stop in my career, the least successful launch I ever had. we were relaunching a popular legacy app. So it was an app that was first created in like 2008. We were just talking about the beginning of apps. So people had gotten really used to it over this time. So I'll make a note that if anyone in your career starts talking about a redesign, just go running the other way. But they can be challenging for people. And that's because at their core, change is really hard for users. In this case, we had done beta testing, user testing. We thought we were launching a really, really good product, but we had a huge backlash to it. People hated it because it was so different of a design from the legacy product that people had gotten used to. And that's because we missed a few steps in the process that really taught me a lesson about how to develop these large scale redesigns that I won't ever miss again. And specifically in this case, it was, a lack of communication. We hadn't let even though we had done beta testing, we hadn't let the larger audience know that we were making such a drastic change. So just one day they downloaded an update to their app and it looked totally different. And so, with the benefit of time, you can sort of see like, that's really jarring and we should have communicated that a lot better. And the second is that we had made product decisions based on just first level metrics. So you have to really understand that you know how people are using your products. So it's not just that you can look at feature B and say, wow, only 5% of our audience uses that. Maybe we don't need to bring it over in our redesign. But if you had looked at it deeper, you would have seen that those users are your most engaged users. Those are your super users. Those users may be 5% of the overall population, but they're accounting for, 55% of your overall usage, right? So those are the people it's really important to keep happy. Those are the people that are going to really leave negative app reviews and make noise on Twitter when you make a change. So I think in those cases, it can be really easy to make a change and to have to pivot after a failure or struggle. Your users will let you know, basically, when you need to, either in the metrics or in qualitative feedback.
Ryan, Colleen, and
yeah.
Yeah, whichever wants to go first.
I was thinking about a little bit about what Bailey said. There was a time at a long time ago when I think it was one of my first jobs out of college. There's a website that went through a redesign. Again, I'm snapping my fingers. They made that big change and then didn't realize there was this one page you had to get to all the other pages, and people hated it. And we were rightfully skewered, I guess you could say, for that. It's like a lesson to learn. But yeah, I think to what Bailey's saying, right? Like for certain things, like we at Newsday, right, we want to make sure that the things that we put our time behind, hopefully you're going to have the best chance to have success. Sometimes we've had to give a little bit more time for certain things to have success, right? So like one of the ideas, when it's not really something that, it's something we still do. So it's not like it's not successful, but we designed a use case to start 2020 around this Netflix style ability for your mobile phone, your mobile app to download a video and take it on the go, because one of our most popular use cases, right, is a user would download the paper and go into New York City, and you see it, right? If you're on commuter rail, you would see people holding the physical paper in their hands. I think Colleen mentioned the tree, right? One of my reporter friends calls it the dead tree. But as we worked on this, we prioritized this to start 2020, and I could tell you guys, we all know what happened in 2020, because when we get ready to release this, we're about a week or the week of full lockdown in New York, so our use case evaporated overnight. So it's just something we've had to kind of think about how that use case was going to matter, and now hopefully we know. I mean, our trains are still. They're running, but I don't think that as many commuters are doing that anymore. So now it's about how do we figure out the best way for this thing to work for us. So that's kind of like, it's a lesson in terms of thinking about what your use case is, but also the ground just shifted kind of underneath us at that point.
And I think working in news, nothing can ever be too precious. Users change, news changes, needs change. And your products have to adapt and evolve to meet those needs as they change. If they don't, you won't evolve. You're dead in the water, right? And so I think it's really important for if you're pitching an idea, if you're trying to start something from scratch, so not even just a product per se, but say you have a new coverage area you want to pitch or something like that, it's really important for you to project out a little bit. What does it look like after a year? What does it look like after 2 years? What does it look like after 3 years? I never really make a proposal without a 3-year trajectory to it. And I think that that's really important, just for you to think about what the evolution could look like. And then for you to kind of know what you would do if things aren't working or if things are. About 7 years ago, we launched an app that was really aimed to be at a national audience. It was highly visual. It was highly curated. It's still available in the App Store today, but it's something that ultimately, we took a lot of lessons from, and people were really engaged with it when it started. We thought that people were so engaged with it that they would want to engage with it in a desktop view. So we basically rendered it in another URL for you to get to consume this thing that was made for mobile, because the visuals would look so much better on a bigger screen, right? There were some people who were highly engaged with it, but everybody knows when they want to go to the Washington Post to go to WashingtonPost.com. Nobody was coming to this version, even if they loved the app and they were highly engaged users. When they went on their desktop, they were going to WashingtonPost.com. So that was something that ultimately, we thought, oh, there's a value to this. This is working so well in other places. Surely it must be something to take there, but it wasn't, right? So that was something we pulled the plug on pretty quickly and said, okay, nope, this is an app experience. Got it. Check. And I think that also at the Post, I work on a lot of platforms that aren't owned and operated, right? So distributed news platforms, things where we are to experiment with a long-term goal, right? I know that today I'm not going to necessarily drive a subscription to the Washington Post off of Snapchat or TikTok. I'm sure you guys have seen Dave Jurgensen, but ultimately, we get in on some of these platforms and these products to see what they're about, to see what we can do there, to push our minds about what journalism can be on different platforms. And sometimes it really works out, like Dave has on TikTok, and sometimes it doesn't. And you may change your form there, you may pull off of a platform altogether. But I think it's really important, at least at the Post, that we try things, and if they're working, we invest in them further, and if they're not working, we make a decision to sort of pull away from them. But I think you always have to think about things in a really iterative way.
It sounds like a lesson that all of you have learned is that number one, it's really important to study your audience, both in advance of anything new and ongoing, and number two, really important to communicate with them. So that said, what are the best ways then to communicate with your audience?
Well, in some ways they'll find you. I think you have to go where they're communicating already, right? That you have to go to the channels and be a part of the discussion where people are giving feedback. And so in the mobile space, that's about App Store reviews. You've got to be reading those every day. Got to be responding to people. We do have a customer care team, but I like to be, involved in kind of looking closely and reading through those every day, just to make sure that you're always internalizing that voice of the customer. But I've done it other different ways in my career, just to kind of date myself a bit. On some of my earliest products, we would create Facebook groups for our, diehard beta testers. And it gave us a really nice forum to be able to communicate and always be available to answer questions and take feedback. Today, that's looking more like, in-app messages to find people who want to be a part of beta groups, talking to people on Twitter who are talking about your product. There's lots of ways that I've done it before, but I think you have to go kind of where people are already expressing opinions and giving feedback.
We'll associate survey loops with new products and features too. As we rolled out audio articles across our site and apps, that was something we were really eager to hear from people on, because it was something that we had heard from our customers before that they really wanted, right? So we made sure that was a feedback loop that they had, that we could get as we thought about how to continue to develop that we could hear from readers. I think another thing is Bailey and I launched a morning briefing just a few months ago. It was really the Post's first foray into a flagship briefing in the morning, but it was something that we heard a lot from our readers that they needed an entry point into the news for the day, that the news was feeling really overwhelming, and that the post can be long-winded, frankly, and that we really wanted a way to be able to interact with our audience in a different way there, right? And so that's something that, we'll continue to build feedback loops into, but it's something that, readers email the writer of the briefing all the time. And every email she gets, I see too. And we're constantly thinking and keeping track of every note that's coming into the app store or an email or wherever, so that we can think about the evolution of that product, because it's new and we're studying everything.
I mean, basically they said a lot of the main things, right? Reading these reviews is so super important to make sure you're understanding their point of view. I was thinking about your question a little bit in terms of maybe in terms of like how we try to explain what we're trying to accomplish to our users, right? So like I'm just taking a different angle on it because they said a lot of what I would have said. But I think that sometimes when we're pushing new things or we want to make sure that we give you exactly what you're looking for, I think it just comes down to how we make it the simplest version of what the user needs to understand, right? So like one of the things we did in our app, we have these video articles, right? And we have play buttons on these articles because we want to be video forward. And for a time, when you hit that play button on a video article, it opened the article. So we weren't really matching your intent, right? You want to play that video. When you hit the play button, you want to play that video. So we need to work in the background and make sure that happened. So it took a little bit of time, but when we make sure now, when you're hitting that play button, you're reflecting what you want, right? We want to make sure that you're getting to where you want to go in the simplest fashion that you can. So that was important to us. the so audience, type your questions in the chat room and or raise your hand with the emoticon. And while you're getting that ready, I'm going to ask one more quick question for them. In your development, you've probably developed apps, newsletters, podcasts. Do you see wildly different audiences for each of those, or wildly different success levels, or is it pretty much the same? They're significantly different products. What are you seeing? And we'll make your answer quick to my question so we can get to the audience. Anybody?
I think you have to have different goals for each of the platform, or for like each way that you can interact with something. You have to have very specific goals for it, right? Like the metrics that you would apply for something that's audio based aren't the same that you would apply for something that is like an enterprise story that people are going to read and that they're going to need to scroll through and that they're going to want to have a lot of time spent on, right? So I think you just apply different goals to each of them. I mean, I wouldn't say that there's like a more engaged user. I would say that there are places where people are more engaged with certain ways of interacting with the news, right? If people are trying to multitask, they can't really read a really long article, right? So you have to kind of think, I think, too, about people's needs at the time of day in their life, or what they're doing in their day. Something somebody needs to start their day is going to be a lot different than something somebody needs to end their day. And they might like take a leisurely read in the evening, but be like a hardcore podcast person in the morning. I think people also have different habits themselves. Good
points. Madison, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry if this is a little long-winded because I'm trying to figure out how to word this question. But at smaller news organizations, those that don't already have an app or who have very few products in general outside of social media channels. How do you balance experimenting and branching out onto different platforms with making sure that you're dedicating resources where they're needed most, if that makes sense? I guess balancing experimentation with dedicating resources to the products that are going to be the most worthwhile, and how do you determine how to do that?
Well, I can say that this is a problem that I faced even at like larger companies. So I wouldn't say that it's probably a technology problem everywhere, right? And I've definitely had stakeholders come to me before wanting to push the envelope on stuff, and the analogy to me that I always use is like, look, I'm over here trying to build a house, and you're telling me about what color paint you want it to be. So like we have to like shore up our foundation first. And then we can talk about like being experimental. So, I think there's always a place for experimentation, and there's always a lane that you can usually carve out for, always to keep that in your mind. But I do think, it's important to keep an eye on keep your focus on your foundational goals that, again, really gets you to where you want to go. So your goal for a year might be, okay, look, we want a mobile app. Like we're going to spend the first half of this year, deciding our audience strategy and, getting a beta like out there in the world with like very simple use cases. That might not be the time to sort of push the needle and test, okay, maybe we want this to be like, I guess you'd have to decide kind of, what kind of app you want it to be, but you might not be doing A/B tests that early in the process. But you might be as part of your, finding your product market fit. So I think that's kind of the balance, right? Is like, sometimes you do have to use experiments to find those core things, but ultimately it's all in service of your larger foundational goal.
Yeah, I was thinking about also, oh, yeah, okay.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. No, sorry. No, I mean, a lot of what Bailey said was great, right? Like, but I think like in terms of, especially in terms of like building the house, right? Make sure your foundation's pretty solid. Like, Bailey said run when you said redesign before. I ran into one, which is nice and fun. But it was a great experience just to put like something together kind of from scratch, because you don't get a lot of opportunities to do something like that. So I think that's the exciting part about it. But kind of back to the question, I think it's in terms of like, and even when we were talking about how you work with newsrooms and how you work with folks on every side of this to make sure that you're implementing something, even if it's new or if you're jumping into a new platform. I think it's also about like, how do we make the simplest version of what they can do? Like we're all saying, right, that our teams are just super stretched, and we need to make sure that we're making this easy on folks. So like, how do we get to the easiest solution that's going to require the least amount of work to like considering what they're already producing, and kind of make it into this next thing. I think that's kind of one place we kind of do with experimentation.
And in a small newsroom, that could be really small an experimentation, right? Like not a new product, not a new platform, a different way to tell journalism. Instead of assigning your reporter to write the feature length story, is experimenting with like length or form, or doing something that you would have, like your go-to would have been an article, is doing a video better, is doing a podcast better. Do you have a reporter who is like hilarious on Twitter and has this great following, and that really makes you want to understand journalism and like buy a subscription? Well, like, think about what you can do with that one person to see whether you should make an investment in a Twitter team. You know what I mean? I think that there are ways that you can kind of look around the room and see what people's strengths are, or what people are already doing, sometimes even outside the capacity of like their current role, what they're just into or excited about, and break off like really small scale things that can at least point you in a direction to say, okay, this is something that we should really experiment with, or this is something we really want to try, or this is something that could really work well. I think that's really important. I was at a small paper before I was at the Post, a small local paper in the South Carolina Low Country. I mean, we actually had one publisher and put out 2 papers. So experimentation was like not a thing there, because there were layoffs and things there. But we would try to experiment with page design. We would try to experiment with our headlines. We would try to experiment with story form. And I think that you always have some faculty over what you can do. It's just, again, about that prioritization and the goals.
That's great advice. And we'll ask a question from Ian, who says, in your prototype testing process, what are some of the indicators specific to news media that you look for to suggest that you should advance the prototype?
So I think that the question is about user testing, right? Like positive signs in user testing.
It looks like, yeah, indicators for news that suggest you should go forward with this. So what are your, when you're launching something new, and as I'm looking at the question, I'm thinking Ian says yes. So there you go.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that you always sort of like, you're never going to like jump straight into a prototype. You're going to like write a memo and an opportunity brief or something like that. You're going to lay out your goals before you ever get to that, right? Like you may sketch something out and put something really flat in front of somebody, a proof of concept, ultimately get user testing or feedback on that before you even get to a prototype. But I think like once you get to a prototype, you start to really user test again, specific questions that you want answered, specific things that you want to understand about what you want to build immediately for your MVP, or as Bailey likes to call it in our newsroom, the minimum delightful product, which I love, and now we're going to like use everywhere. But MVP is probably what you guys are more familiar with. But you want to go through that user testing and be really deliberate about who you're talking to and what you're asking about, so you can understand what your product needs to be to start with, so you don't inflate your scope and all of the other things I think that we've sort of like talked about before. Bailey and Ryan probably have some more tactical things from a product perspective, but from a news perspective.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to asking the right question. Like you mentioned asking the right questions. One of my most fun user tests to do is to just put somebody in the app and ask them to do a bunch of simple tasks and see how difficult it becomes sometimes for some folks. And I know other places I've been have done that too. And it just is insightful about, youth. We're all about the details. We know all of these different things and how all this different stuff functions in the front and the back. We probably know a lot more than anybody when you drop them in. And it's interesting to see like where folks can kind of go astray, if you will.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think, user testing is so interesting, especially being a part of it. And I kind of think that what's coolest thing is like, you've been in a feature, you've been thinking about it, you're working with your designer for weeks or maybe months, and this is the first time you're getting it in front of a user. And sometimes you have the experience where you kind of see the light come on in people's eyes and that they got what you were going for. And then sometimes people open it and be like, oh, this is just an ad. And they scroll right past it. And like, you have the opposite effect. You're just like, like, what did I miss in this process? So kind of both experiences. And that doesn't mean you should throw the baby out with the bathwater. There just might be something small you need to fix or tweak. But you almost never can predict exactly what people are going to say about a feature. So that's one of my favorite things about, getting user testing, because we do really get way too far into the weeds. And no matter what anyone says, like, we're not the average user. We have a very different perspective on both technology and news than the average sort of consumer. So it's really important to get your products out there.
All right. Do any of you have a final comment? Thought, advice? This has been a great session and really helpful. Colleen, you go ahead. You were just on
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to sort of say, I think it's really important as you sort of like go into your first jobs, or as you're looking at openings or those sorts of things, that you don't sell yourself short. The young women here in particular, like statistically, women are like less likely to apply for things if they don't check all of the boxes that are laid out in an application. I would say that like people going into their first like real job out of school sometimes fall into that as well. Don't put yourself out there. Imposter syndrome happens at all levels all the time after many years in the business. So try not to let it impede your progress or what you want. And I think also it's really important to sort of know yourself and to know your values, and to make sure that those align with the people at the organization, with the work that you're doing, so that you kind of always have a reason why you're there. Work will always get tough, especially in journalism. News is really hard. It is really draining. You have to take care of yourself and you have to take care of your people. But it's really exciting. You can make a huge change. You make a really big impact on people. And I think that it's really important that you like kind of have that centering point of why you're there, to kind of fall back on as you sort of go into jobs and stuff. So like we said before too, get to know people, ask questions, understand people. You'll understand the room. It will make you a better journalist and a better person. And I think that that's like the sort of like biggest takeaway. If you walk away from one thing here, it's like, be a good colleague, be a good communicator, get to know people. And it'll make you a lot more successful. I think sometimes, especially on the newsroom side, relationships can be really transactional. Somebody goes to product because they like need a thing built or a thing done, but they're like not thinking about everything else that is on Bailey's roadmap and how she is like trying to achieve like all these other things for all of these other people who matter too, and their priorities are just as important. So I think that like taking that sort of empathetic thought process into what can be a really competitive space sometimes is the advice I would leave you with.
Well, Colleen, Ryan, Bailey, you have given some wonderful, helpful, practical, realistic advice that honestly, if anybody took this advice, their career will advance. It was so great. Now we have some announcements from Pam Dempsey about next steps and giveaways. So Pam.
Yeah, definitely. So Emma Parr, congratulations. You are our Starbucks winner for this round. And just want to remind everybody, we have our next session starting here at 11 in the next room with Amy Schmitz-Wise. And you can make your way there. You can also stay and hang out with any speaker that's still around. Also, a reminder to everyone, there is kind of an open group discussion room. If you need some privacy and just want to hang out, you're welcome to join that break room as well. And thanks again to our speakers. I do have my final wrap up would you rather question, so bear with me just a moment, please. And you guys are all each getting one. Bailey, we'll start with you. Would you rather eat an uncooked meal or a burnt meal? And why?
I guess I'll go with the burnt meal. Like, at least you're not going to get food poisoning. That's my rationale. I'll stick to it.
It's a good one. Anybody who wants to answer, please also pop in the chat. For Colleen, would you rather master every musical instrument or every type of sport? And why?
Oh, probably every musical instrument. You could be your own band. I mean, it'd be like Mary Poppins. That was pretty boss.
That's pretty awesome. And Ryan, this is for you. Would you rather always have wet socks or a small rock in your shoe?
Oh gosh. Oh man, that's trouble. I'll say the small rock just because I guess I could just bear with it. The wet socks, nah, it's not for me.
I agree.
It's a tough one, man. Wish I got the other one.
Definitely
thank you again for your time. I'm going to move on to the next room. Everyone still feel free to stay as long as you want. Amy will start here in about 8 minutes. Emma Parr, if you could please message me your email address, I'll get you your card. Thanks again, y'all.
And again, Colleen, Ryan, and Bailey can stick around for anyone who wants to ask them continuing questions. They'll just ask you to unmute. I'm going to have to bop over to the next room. And so I just want to give Colleen, Ryan, and Bailey another thank you. And we appreciate it very much. Thanks a lot.